So let's talk a little bit more about advanced degrees. What motivated you to pursue an advanced degree? And if you don't mind, just remind everybody what your advanced degree is in.
All right. In my case, first of all, I have a master's degree or an MBA with a specialization or concentration in finance from Georgia State. But prior to that, I also have another advanced degree, a Master of Science in aerospace engineering, and then undergraduate degrees in mathematics, physics, and Spanish. So for me, the key factor that, if you put it in one sentence, that was a motivating factor for me on the advanced degrees was both the master's in aerospace and the master's in finance, for different reasons, opened doors. And so it wasn't specifically that I knew exactly what I was going to do with those. Certainly when I entered the master's for aerospace, I had a strong desire to deal with airplanes, to design and develop and build airplane businesses, aviation businesses. But I couldn't have articulated that very clearly at the time. When I came to the MBA in finance, when I was already working and had a lot of experience, I'd been an aircraft engineer at Delta Airlines. I had done some other things, but I had a real desire to quantify my ability in the finance world for the benefit of other people, and it opened doors where I knew I wanted to go.
Okay. Chip, you want to?
Yeah. Repeat the question again, real quick.
Yeah. So, what motivated you to pursue an advanced degree? And if you could just remind everybody what your advanced degree is in.
My advanced degree is in human development and psychology, especially for adolescents and teenagers. And I knew I had a special gift of working with young people, and also in higher education, youth programming, and so forth. So I wanted to pursue that. But I also knew that if I wanted to start my own nonprofit, that I needed to have the right networks. And it's very interesting now today compared to maybe 20 years ago, whereas people are able to start different ventures without having a traditional degree and so forth. It's a different way of how the kind of world was viewed, and it's all about networks and so forth. It's still about networks as well, but I thought it was very important. But also, I also wanted to make sure that I wanted people to realize is that in order for me to have access to those networks, I needed to have those kind of degrees. Like one thing is that I worked in philanthropy, I worked in government and also nonprofit before I jumped into starting my own nonprofit. But it was very important to have those experiences because I was able to meet a lot of funders, also meet a lot of people in the government agencies and so forth that really helped out later to build the nonprofit and get resources and networks and in-kind services that I never would have gotten if I didn't have those experiences. But I also think about some of my early experiences. I remember being 13 years old and got a job at McDonald's. Like, I was able to count money so fast after that. I was like, wow, this is amazing. But also I worked at Kinko's when I was 17 years old, 18 years old in Cambridge. And I learned how to develop flyers, put together packages, Xerox. It's funny, I say the word Xerox in front of my students and they're like, Professor Greenidge, what's a Xerox? And I'm like, oh my God, you know what I mean? Like, it's just the old word, but all those experiences, I always refer to my favorite superhero, who's Batman. It gives you this utility belt of things that you can use in order to start your business. So I know some people just say, they're 17, I want to be an entrepreneur. That's great. But I also want them to kind of unpack and think about where you can go to get those very rich experiences, just like Brent talking about working in the motor shop and so forth. Those are the experiences that help you propel yourself to be able to be a real versed entrepreneur and be able to handle some things.
Yeah, good points. How about you, Nicole?
I just want to echo what Chip is saying because I decided to become what I wanted to do, I wanted to become an astronomy professor. That was my dream, right? And it kind of started, this was like, I didn't have like a very linear path to the PhD. Like a lot of my white peers who like, would talk about, going stargazing when they were very young, or like taking apart radios and things like that. And I didn't have that experience because I came from a working class, Latinx family. And so one thing that did happen is that when my mom married my stepdad when I was like 11, our family structure became a lot more stable financially. And so I was able to go on my first overnight trip through school. And I'm from Miami. And so it happened to be that we were going to Orlando. We were going to the Kennedy Space Center. So that was my first time interacting with space, really, when I was 11. And it was just incredible, because before that, I didn't have access. Right. I didn't have access to that kind of information, that kind of like, thing. Right. And so that was a really, really important moment. And that, I think, is like, looking back, I can say, oh, wow, that was really the first moment. Right. And then after that, I think it was like a year or two later that my parents scraped together what they had, and they got me a telescope, but it was a really small one, but I didn't know how to use it. And like, I don't think, they didn't know how to use it either. So there's like all these barriers right along the way. And so, eventually, like, I kind of stumbled upon physics. I stumbled upon astronomy. I ended up, I did community college for my first 2 years. Shout out to Miami-Dade College. And then I transferred to Georgia Tech for my undergrad, because that's where my high school physics teacher went, and that's where I wanted to go. And then from there, I just happened to take an astronomy class. I wanted to do astronomy research. My undergrad advisor, who's still there, Dr. Jim Sowell, he was very instrumental in like mentoring me. And, he said, there are these research experience for undergraduates, you should apply. And, I didn't even know what that was, right, at the time. And so he really like pushed me to do that. And he wrote all my letters of rec. And that summer, I think, I applied to 10 different summer research programs, and I only got into one of them, but that one was in Hawaii. So I got to go observe on these really big telescopes in Hawaii, and I got to do astronomy, full time, like as a researcher. And that really cemented it for me, but that was in my junior year of college. Right. And then I got to grad school, at Georgia State, and it was, I'm like on this path, and I'm like, everything's going great, don't get me wrong, it was hard. But I was still like very, very focused. And so for me, my story is, I think, a little bit different, because I had to pivot, right? As like a lot of entrepreneurs say, like, I had my whole life planned out. Like, basically the academic path is pretty set in stone, right? Like, you have to, at least for an academic researcher, you have your PhD, and then you have to apply to a couple of postdocs, and then you apply for faculty positions, and then you get tenure. And so there's like the next 10, 15 years of your life are mapped out, right? And, but after experiencing a lot of, negative things, discrimination, microaggressions, macroaggressions, all these different things, after 4 years of that, I found myself kind of, I didn't want to do science anymore, because my science was like inextricably linked to the negative experiences that I had had, right? And so it gets all like tangled up, in your head. And so I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And it's wild, because I'm like, this is like my lifelong dream, right? Like my biggest dream is to do this. And it's, it's not a coincidence, right? It's a factor of like environment and all this stuff. And so what I did is I went to career counseling, and Ashley Watts, who she's not at Career Services anymore. I believe she works for the College of Public Policy. So she was like, well, I've never worked with a PhD student before. I've never worked with somebody from the astronomy department, but I'll help you figure out like what you can do, right? Because I was like, I'm going to finish my PhD, but I have to get out of this field. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I have no idea. My entire plan is like out the window, right? And so, but she said she was going to help me. And so I went, I did one-on-one career counseling, not just a resume review. Okay. She and I met like bi-weekly for 2 or 3 years, right? For the rest of my time. And while like, she really helped me kind of understand, because I thought, you know, what am I going to do with a PhD in astronomy if I don't do astronomy? Like I shot myself in the foot. If I had at least gotten a physics PhD, I would have had lab experience and I can take that to industry, right? So, but you know, I told her like, I wasted all this time. Like I could have done something else. And she was like, no, because I mean, if you hadn't experienced the things that you experienced, you know, throughout your PhD, you would not be able to help people who are in the same situation, you know? So, so she was helping me to, realize what skills I had that were applicable in the industry. And also like build up, she's like, okay, you have these 2 years before you graduate. Now is the time to look for those opportunities to gain those skills. So by the time you graduate, then you can, you know, do those things. And she was the first person to tell me, like, she's like, I see you doing your own thing. I see you like writing a book or like having your own, whatever it is. Right. And I was like, okay, girl, like, I'm just trying to get a job out here, you know? But she really believed in me. And she actually, she's literally an angel. Like she ended up nominating me for Georgia State's first TEDx event, you know, and they asked me, do you want to give a talk on your research? And I said, no, I want to give a talk on the importance of diversity in STEM. And that's what I did, right? And so it was like through this series of like accidents that I kind of ended up where I'm at. But entrepreneurship was really a way for me to do what I wanted to do, which was to change the culture of science, right? Because right now it is like steeped in white supremacy and capitalism and individualism, right? And change that, transform that into something that is more collective based, that actually values its marginalized members. And like Ashley said, like I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't gone through it. You know what I'm saying? And so I was able to take that experience and then help other people with it. But absolutely, I mean, I think that developing these skills while you're still in school and kind of like opening up those possibilities is really important. And I know that this happens in other fields. Like I know computer science, you know, people expect to go to industry right after their bachelor's degree, or even after their PhD, right? In my field, it's expected to go into academia. So there's not a lot of conversation about other types of careers or things you can do. So I was actually very lucky that that I had, you know, my partner modeling like what entrepreneurship looks like, you know, behind the scenes. And I could say like, you know, I have all these job offers. None of them are really what I want to do. So I can do my own thing, you know?
Yeah. That's a great response. And I'm not going to ask this question because I actually think that you have all answered it essentially in your responses. But you know, I think there is a perception out there, and there's even some data out there that suggests that you know, you don't need a college degree, let alone an advanced degree, to be an entrepreneur. And that's thanks to, you know, people like Mark Zuckerberg and, you know, Steve Jobs and those that dropped out of college, right, and built, you know, very successful companies. But I think, you know, you've got 4 people on this panel who clearly, you know, the advanced degree has helped them in various ways get to the point where they are today as entrepreneurs. And so, so I think we know what this group anyway feels about the value of an advanced degree towards your entrepreneurial endeavors. And so